Hello and welcome to our last lesson in this unit on proportional relationships. Our learning target is I can solve problems using proportional reasoning. And this is something that we've worked on before, we're just putting it in a slightly different context now. Our first example says, on weekday mornings it takes Imani 12 minutes to bike 2 miles to her school. This Saturday, Imani will bike to the park to meet her friends. The park is 5 miles away from Imani's house. If she bikes at the same rate, how many minutes will it take Imani to get to the park? So our key thing here is that it's saying if she bikes at the same rate. And that's telling us that we can set up a proportion to help us figure out how long it will take her to get to the park. When we're setting up proportions, it's important that we are comparing our units correctly. So I'm going to think, what are the two things that are being compared right now? So I'm going to reread. On weekday mornings, it takes Imani 12 minutes to bike 2 miles to her school. So we're comparing minutes and miles. So my first step is going to be to set up a proportion with those two units. So I'm going to put minutes on the top just because that came first, and then miles on the bottom. Then I'm going to say equals, and then I'm going to read again. Okay, it takes Imani 12 minutes to bike 2 miles. And then it says this Saturday, Imani will bike to the park to meet her friends. The park is 5 miles away from Imani's house. So the 5 is going to go on the bottom. And then we don't know how many minutes it will take her to get to the park. So when we don't know something, in math, we use a variable, and oftentimes we like to use x. So I'm just going to put x up there. Now is when we can get creative to think, how are we going to figure out what x is? There are multiple ways to do this. What I'm going to think right now, actually, is I know that to go from 2 to 12 is going to be the same thing as going from 5 to x. So I'm going to think, what do I multiply by to go from 2 to 12, or 2 times what is 12? Well, I know that 2 times 6 is 12, so 5 times 6 would get me x. So 5 times 6 equals 30. So my final answer will be that it takes Imani 30 minutes to get to the park. Our second example says, the original recipe for macaroni and cheese calls for 8 cups of cheese and 3 cups of milk. Holly is going to make a big batch for New Year's and is going to use 12 cups of cheese. If she uses the same recipe, how much milk will she use? So once again, we want to think first, what am I comparing? So in this case, we're comparing cheese and milk. So I'm going to write that, cheese, I can't spell, cheese over milk equals, so what do we know? We know that she's going to use 8 cups of cheese for every 3 cups of milk. And then it says she's going to use 12 cups of cheese, and we don't know how much milk she's going to use. So in this case, it's not so obvious. I can't think, well, 8 times what is 3, or 8 times what is 12. I can't think of a whole number right away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use our cross multiply and divide strategy that we've learned before. So I'm going to multiply the numbers that are across from each other. Do 3 times 12, that equals 36. And then I am going to divide by the number that is across from the x, because we know that these two things multiply to equal each other. So I'm going to do 36 divided by 8, and 36 divided by 8 is 4.5, or 4.5. So what that's telling us is that she is going to use 4.5 cups of milk. Bingo. Your next step is either to do the solving proportions IXL that's linked with this video or the worksheet. They're basically the same. I took the worksheet problems from IXL. The key thing here is to make sure that you are setting up your proportion with units and that you are solving it in whatever way makes sense for you. There are multiple ways to solve these problems. I'm going to show us how to do the first one. It says, last year, Kendra planted 6 rows of tomatoes and 8 rows of peppers. Kendra wants to keep the same ratio this year, but she only plans to plant 3 rows of tomatoes. How many rows of peppers will Kendra plant this year? So first, I want to think, what am I comparing? I'm comparing tomatoes and peppers. So tomatoes over peppers equals, she did 6 rows of tomatoes and 8 rows of peppers. And then it says she only plans to plant 3 rows of tomatoes, so 3 will go on top. And we don't know that. So I'm going to rewrite over here. 6 over 8 equals 3 over x. Well, I can think right now, what do I do, multiply or divide, to go from 6 to 3? I multiply by a half or divide by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 equals 4. So she will plant 4 rows of peppers. Remember to show your work and write your solution using units. Good luck.